Such a nice big audience. Good afternoon, dear friends. Today we continue the cycle of meetings of Ukrainian youth from various universities, from all leading universities of the country, with the leading events of today from all places of the world. World champion of boxing, Mr. Pinchuk. He is a doctor too, but your lecture will be later. Dear friends, students normally meet politicians. We organize meetings with Clinton, Blair, Paris, Dominic Strauss-Kahn recently. Always there were discussions of global trends on the globe in the field of politics and economics. Lately, we began thinking, what was the main trend of today? What is the main phenomenon which dominates? And of course, this is the internet. And we, on our Yalta conference last year, for the first time decided that in addition to such global topics, global politics, local politics, we decided to discuss this new global trend on the internet. I invited one of their most well-known investors into the internet project, Yuri Miller. If you know Digital Sky Technology, he was the first to invest into Facebook with capitalization of 10 billion at that time. I think he can make 10 times more because on Friday there will be an IPO of Facebook. Capitalization is expected 10 times more. He is a well-known investor and he made a presentation for us back in Yalta. Before that, he did that on summit of G8. They invited the leading political leaders, invited the leading internet operators. He quoted the numbers. For example, what scope of information the mankind generated since the beginning of civilization before 2003. In year 2010, the same scope of information was generated in 48 hours. By 2020, it will be generated within 1 hour. They say if today internet users, there are 2 billion internet users on the globe, in several years, not later than 2020, there will be 5 billion. It's a global phenomenon, we understood. By the way, when the article was placed on Reuters in 2011, it was second by paper by popularity placed by Reuters. This information, this phenomenon is interesting for Ukrainians, is interesting for us as well. We decided to continue like that, to move forward, make Ukrainians familiar with most interesting trends, the most interesting people. I thought the most interesting people, one of the most interesting people who can speak of how do they see the development of internet of the globe and how it can change the present-day reality. I thought there is no better person who can speak of it compared to Jimmy Wells, the founder of Wikipedia. He is with us today. Please welcome him. Today he will talk to you. The moderator. Helping him communicate with you by Andrei Kulikov. He is the anchor of Freedom of Speech on IPTV. Please, Andrei.
Okay, thank you. It's really great to be here. I want to thank Victor for inviting me to come. I've known Victor for, I think, 4 or 5 years now, and we meet here and there in different places around the world, and he's been bugging me to come, and so finally here I am. And so what he's asked me to talk about today is the internet changing tomorrow. And I'm going to do that by telling you a little bit about my story, the story of Wikipedia, projects that I'm working on, and I'll try to tie it to broader trends on the internet. And one of the things that I really want to focus on, particularly because I'm talking to a lot of students, is failure. Because I think that's a really important part of success, and I think it's something that I feel like Madonna here with this thing. I look like Madonna, okay. So let's just start at the beginning, talking about Wikipedia. And the original vision statement for Wikipedia is for all of us to imagine a world in which every single person on the planet is given free access to the sum of all human knowledge. And that's what we're doing at Wikipedia. Every element of this mission statement is important. When we talk about every single person on the planet, this is about how the project is inherently global. Free access has a special meaning, which I'll talk about in a minute. And the sum of all human knowledge helps to define what Wikipedia is and what Wikipedia is not. So what is Wikipedia? I always love to ask, how many people here have used Wikipedia? This is just to make sure everyone's awake. But the real question is, how many people have edited Wikipedia? And that's good. So it looks like about more and more in the back, maybe 20%. So the reason that I ask that is because a lot of people who have just used Wikipedia, you type the search in a search engine, and you come to Wikipedia, you may not have all the ideas of what it's really about. So the basic definition of Wikipedia is that Wikipedia is a freely licensed encyclopedia written by thousands of volunteers in many languages. So what do I mean by free access or free license? It means everything in Wikipedia is placed by the community under a free license, meaning that you can copy it, modify it, redistribute modified versions. You can do all of these things commercially or non-commercially. So it's very much like open source software. It's software you can take it and do anything that you want with it, which is quite unique amongst projects on the internet. And it's really a fundamental part of our humanitarian mission to give free access to everyone. Some of the things that this empowers it means you're allowed to translate Wikipedia into different languages. If you're teaching younger students and you find some Wikipedia entry useful but maybe too difficult for them, you can make some modifications to it before you hand it out so that they can understand it. What do I mean when I say the sum of all human knowledge? Well, what this means is that Wikipedia is something very particular. It's an encyclopedia. Wikipedia is not a library, it's not a textbook, it's not an archive. Wikipedia is not YouTube. So I love funny cat videos as much as anybody. My daughter's always sending me cat videos, but these don't belong in Wikipedia. Wikipedia offers an essentialized summary of human knowledge with the depth of the material depending on the context. So it's pretty much just the basic information, and we don't really want to go beyond that. So we've got a community of people who've now written over 20 million articles across 270 different languages. One of the things that you'll be very happy to know about is that Ukrainian Wikipedia is really one of the most successful Wikipedias. With 383,000 articles, it is the 14th largest version of Wikipedia, which is amazing for the number of speakers of the language. Just as an example, the Chinese are a little bit ahead. They're 11th, but there's a few more Chinese people than Ukrainians, I have to say. I think there are more Chinese people outside of China than there are Ukrainians. So it's a very impressive achievement. One of the things people are always interested in is, because we're in so many different languages, how does the content differ across different languages? And the good news is it's actually quite similar. If you read in different language versions, you'll find there's a consistent style across different versions. Obviously, sometimes you'll get more information or less information, but it's generally quite consistent. But one of the things that we've looked at is, what are people reading in Wikipedia? And that does tend to vary to some extent in different places around the world. And so we did this little study, which I think is interesting. And I know this is kind of small, so it's a little bit hard to see, but this is showing the most popular articles in several different languages. So we have English, Chinese, Japanese, French, German, Russian, and Spanish across here. So one of the things that you can see here is that the Japanese bar, the long green bar, it says pop culture. So if you know anything about Japan, this makes perfect sense. The Japanese love pop culture. They love American pop culture. They love English pop culture. They love Japanese pop culture. So it's a really big deal in Japan. Another thing to notice here is that the Germans are the most interested in geography. Not sure that's a good thing. This is a good joke in Russia. It's not such a good joke in Germany. What else? So if we look here, the other thing that you notice is that sex, of course, is among the top topics almost everywhere in the world, except for in French and Spanish. I was puzzled by this until somebody explained it to me. It's because the French and the Spanish are actually having sex. Everybody else is just reading on the internet. Well, it's good to joke about this, but the truth is when we really dig a little bit deeper, it turns out that what people are reading in Wikipedia is very similar around the world. You'll find that people are very interested in their local context, local politics. So when we say geography, the Germans are reading a lot about places in Germany. When we think about politics, everyone loves to read about their local politicians. And so even though what's popular in Russia or China or Japan or the US may be different in some ways, in a deeper sense it's probably more like the same because people do care about their local context, local politics, local culture. So that's quite interesting. So if we look overall at Wikipedia today, we have over 460 million people visiting the website every month. This slide's a little bit out of date. We actually passed 470 million last month, and we expect to pass 500 million before the end of the year. And so this brings up the question of who are the Wikipedians? Who is writing all of this material? It's a very interesting question. Why do we want to know who the Wikipedians are? Well, here's one reason why. This is a quote from a woman who turned out to be a school librarian on Twitter, and she says, "Yesterday I asked one of my students if she knew what an encyclopedia is, and she said, is it something like Wikipedia?" So if you think about someone who is a student who is maybe 15 years old. So student's 15 years old. Wikipedia is 11 years old. So this means that for the entire time that someone who's 15 has known how to read, Wikipedia has been there online. And certainly in the last 5 years, when they would have been old enough, say age 10 to 15, to start really looking things up on the internet, Wikipedia was very large and very popular. So for the next generation, younger than this audience, the next generation coming up, Wikipedia is really always been a core part of their life. Just as for you, it's been a core part of your life as a student for the last several years. It's been a part of their life forever. And so we're part of the infrastructure of the world, and so this puts a very heavy responsibility on our community to make sure that we're doing a good job, that we're getting it right. So who are the Wikipedians? Well, by the numbers, we're about 87% male. We're not very happy about this number. We would like to be more diversified in the contributors. An average age of around 26. I think that's perfectly fine. We have a lot of college students, but a lot of older students, older graduates, and things like that contributing. We have about double the percentage of PhDs compared to the general public. So that doesn't mean that Wikipedia is mostly written by PhDs. It just means that there's a lot of PhDs in the community. Now I'm going to show you a quick video, I hope, oops, sorry, I'm making a mistake here. This is to introduce to you some of the people who edit Wikipedia, and I think it's important to put a human face on it. We've all used Wikipedia, but it's easy to think of Wikipedia as some magical institution, and so I want you to meet some of the people who are actually writing Wikipedia. So let's see if I can get this to play. And the answer is no.
No, I don't have superpowers. At all. None. You could totally do it.
I pushed the button and saved the text. Woo! It was exciting.
You just changed Wikipedia. You just added your own contribution to Wikipedia.
I read an article in The Guardian about this online encyclopedia which everybody can contribute to, and I thought, oh, maybe I can contribute too as well.
I edited the first time and I think I got addicted to it. I don't get paid anything. I just do it for, something to do in my free time, that's it.
You may start doing it for an idea because you believe in it, but you end up with friends, you end up with lovers, you end up with wonderful discussions, you end up with new ideas, you end up with the new books you're going to write.
You're not writing the article alone. You write a piece and somebody else goes like, hey, I have more, and together you can create articles that are pages long, which you can't by yourself.
Then you have success. You always see, okay, what I've done was successful. And this is great because, so editing is a great feeling every time you do it.
As I say, when I read about Wikipedia, I decided that this is maybe where I would fit in, and I did.
Right. So that's just a quick introduction to some of the Wikipedians. One of the interesting things about us is that we are a charity. The Wikimedia Foundation is the organization I set up that owns and operates Wikipedia. And Wikipedia has, the number's a little bit out of date, it's about 100 people now. So our movement consists of about 100 people and maybe 100,000 volunteers. So the organization that runs Wikipedia is really quite small, all things considered, particularly when you compare it to all of the other top websites, which you would expect to have hundreds or even thousands of employees. So it's a really remarkable project where the volunteers really do the bulk of the work. So one of the questions that's always interesting, particularly for students and people who are just starting out in a career, is how did I get here? And for me, I think I'm often invited to speak on the theory that I'm somehow a successful person. But I think the most important story about how I got here is that failure, Jimmy Wales is good at it. I've had many, many interesting failures in my life, going all the way back to the first website I created. I was living in Chicago, and I was working as a futures and options trader in Chicago. And I had this brilliant business idea. I was using the internet a lot. It was very early days of the web. And I noticed that people were using very inefficient ways to get food at work. They were faxing in orders, they were calling, sending somebody to get the food, and I thought, let's just put all this on the internet. So you could just, from your desk, you could order lunch and have it delivered, which, by the way, today is a very, very big business in Chicago. But at the time, the result was failure. Jimmy Wales is good at it. In 1996, when I was trying to do this, restaurant owners looked at me like I was from Mars. When I said, we should put your menu on the internet, and they said, what's the internet? We have no idea what you're talking about. So I started a new project. My next project was a search engine. I had what I thought was a brilliant business idea. First of all, the name was called 3 Apes, and the slogan was, type your search and the apes will find it. Tell me that's not genius. I actually did this. The brilliant business idea was pay-per-click advertising. There'd be 2 ways to pay. You could either actually pay for advertising on the site, or you could send traffic to the site and earn credits for advertising. So I thought this would be a way to grow the traffic and so forth. Anyway, the result, you can guess, failure. Jimmy Wales is good at it. Chinese spammers took over the site within 3 months. So the next thing I came up with was Nupedia. So again, a brilliant business idea. A free encyclopedia for everyone. Starting to get familiar here. Would be written by experts. I hired a PhD in philosophy to help design it. What was the result? Failure. Jimmy Wales is good at it. I spent about $250,000 on the first 12 articles to be written. I always say I keep them by my bed and read them every night. I will get my money's worth someday. It didn't work because it was very top down, it was very controlled, and it wasn't really working. So then I had a really dumb idea. My really dumb idea was to have a free encyclopedia for everybody. I would open up a website, let anybody edit it. There'll be no advertising. In fact, no sane business plan of any kind. And what was the result? Success. Even Jimmy can do it sometimes. Wikipedia, of course, has been a massive success. We're the #5 website in the world, changing the face of knowledge forever. It's a very inspirational project, and it takes me around the world to meet great people like you. So this is really great, and so on the success of this, I thought, okay, my next project, and I decided to go back to search again. I thought the 3 Apes thing was almost the right thing, but I came up with the idea for a search engine, Wikia Search, where people would be able to edit the search results and so on. I think it's quite an interesting idea. Certainly, because Wikipedia had already been a great success, we got a lot of attention. This is the cover of Fast Company magazine. There's my picture. It says, Google's worst nightmare. I don't think that's true, but my mother bought 10 copies, so it's okay in the end. So how was the result of this? Well, again, failure. Jimmy Wales is good at it. What happened here was, although the project was very promising and I was happy with the progress of the software, we realized it would take several million more dollars of investment beyond what we had already invested to become fully functional, and then the economic crisis came and we realized there was going to be no possibility of raising new money for such a speculative project for a while. So we closed the project during the economic downturn. However, out of this project of the Wikia search engine, we also were working on related things, and the idea here was to build on the Wikipedia model, empower everybody to build the rest of the library, everything that doesn't belong in the encyclopedia, focus on making it easy to use, think about topics with good ad revenue, and what was the result? Success. Even Jimmy can do it a second time. So where the encyclopedia was the start, we think that of the library as being much, much bigger. And so this next phase of things is growing beyond Wikipedia with the summary of human knowledge into every other possibility. This has been an enormous success so far. We have about 65 million visitors every month. Our traffic continues to grow and grow and grow. We're profitable. We have about 120 employees. So it's quite remarkable. Even though it's not as famous as Wikipedia, it has been something that, because of things I learned in the past, I was able to do something interesting again. So for those of you who don't know of Wikia, I'll just give one example of one of our sites. How many people know the TV show Lost? Have you seen the, yeah, TV show Lost. How many of you actually understood the TV show Lost? Oh, one guy. Probably because he was on Lostpedia, which is a community site that is the ultimate document of everything having to do with the TV show Lost. They've written over 7,000 articles. The show has come to an end now, so the growth of the site has slowed down. But it's just an example. And one of the interesting things about the Lostpedia site is that I know the creator of the show, J.J. Abrams. I mean, he told me, you know, oh, we love Lostpedia. We use Lostpedia all the time. And there was an interview in a magazine with the head writer telling about this story when they were stumped. They were going to refer to Canada, but they couldn't remember how they had done it in the past. They didn't know quite what to do, so they looked it up in Lostpedia. And what they found in Lostpedia is that every time someone mentions Canada on the show, they're lying. And so the fans had noticed this, and then they wrote that into the show. So the show ended up being this interesting collaboration between the writers of the show and the Lostpedia community that was documenting everything about the show and theorizing about what was going on. And it was that interplay that really led to it becoming an ever more complicated and interesting show. So we could talk a lot more about Wikia and what we're doing there, but now I think I'll just bring it to a close, because I think the most interesting part of the show is questions and answers. So I'm really eager to hear from you, whatever questions you have, and we'll be off to the races.